Welcome to G42 On Air, your front row access to the AI breakthroughs and the visionaries transforming our world. From the heart of the UAE here in Abu Dhabi, G42 is a global pioneer in AI and cloud technologies, tackling society's biggest challenges, from healthcare and energy to climate and the frontiers of space. So, how do we turn AI's potential into practice and purpose? Join me, Amandeep, for this special podcast series, exploring groundbreaking innovations, why they matter, the responsibilities involved, and if these solutions can be scaled worldwide to maximize impact for all. Can AI be powerful and principled? With AI's ability to impact millions of lives and reshape society, the stakes couldn't be higher. To help us unpack these profound questions, for today's episode, we're joined here in the studio by Baroness Joanna, founder and CEO of Precognition, and Marty Edelman, Group General Counsel at G42. Baroness Joanna, if I may come to you first. What do we mean by responsible AI, responsible intelligence?
I look at responsible AI as an opportunity. We have spent the last 10 years in the social media era in a time where we didn't think through the unintended consequences of technology. So when you look at AI and its enormous potential to empower and to um, enhance human agency and give people all kinds of opportunities, you have to think about responsibility and human dignity at the outset to ensure that we get it right this time, because I think we have a pretty poor track record as technologists in delivering technology equally, fairly, responsibly, that really meets the threshold of human dignity.
And as we're starting with those definitions, in this context, human dignity means, in this AI context, it means
Human dignity in this context, I would say, is some people talk about it as a feature. We have to make sure we enhance human dignity. It has to be a foundational element. From the very outset, you have to think about human dignity, human agency, and what this technology is going to do to elevate everyone in society. And I think that's what we're here to talk about today in terms of responsible AI.
there's some really powerful words there about empowering agency and human dignity. Marty, from your point of view, Group Counsel at G42, responsible AI.
Responsible AI really should focus on the AI piece. AI is a tool. It's a tool that probably is one of the most revolutionary tools, certainly in modern history. Um, Electricity was a modern tool, and just as it was identified earlier, there are still over 700 million people in the world who don't have access to it. So we have a tool that could be available to the entire world. And the question is how? What's the mechanism? How do you teach it? How do you explain it? How do you help people use it? And how do you help people think about a sense of responsibility in the way it's both taught and used? So when we at G42 think about it and we call it intelligence as opposed to AI, it's really part of our view that we have created an intelligence grid, which is like a distribution system for artificial intelligence, or as Ping likes to say, advanced intelligence.
So that's how you make the distinction between responsible AI and responsible intelligence, taking it to the next level.
Yeah.
And Baroness Shields, drawing on your vast experience of building platforms, scaling for tech giants from Meta, Google, how would you say responsible AI, responsible intelligence should be baked into the platforms from the offset?
Well, after building and scaling platforms for over 30 years, what I learned is that you must think about the entire world in the context of product development from the outset. Because a lot of times, as an American technology company, it's America first, and then it's the rest of the world. And rest of world, to me, is a big mistake in this context, because AI has a potential to really be the great human leveler. It can really elevate all societies, but it has to be fair. It has to be representative. of other markets and other cultures and other languages. And when you think about multimodal models now, you think about the rich plethora of content that you can bring into decision making, and that connection of a human being to that agent, and that conversation is so powerful. But it's much more powerful if we're inclusive and we think about the entire world, and we reflect that in our product development and design at the outset. And so I think that my experience has taught me that you think about the whole world first, and you think about how do you raise that level? How can this technology achieve its true potential throughout the world? And that elevates the American story as well.
So you've just given us a little insight in terms of your vast experience there. We want to hear more about this. But Marty, Baroness Shields brings up some really important points there about achieving the potential, but being representative, being inclusive. I feel like this is a seamless link to hear more about what G42 are doing, especially when it comes to the Global South.
Yeah, so our view really is, or maybe it's my view, and I would like it to be our view, I'm not sure. But my view is that so far, artificial intelligence has been an elite tool, and that the failure to properly understand the negative impact that keeping it that way is part of the challenge that we at G42 face. So when we look at the Global South, which is really not the US and not Western Europe, where the capacity for distribution of artificial intelligence is easier and it's actually quite vast. We work in an area where it's not, where the challenges of using AI are really monumental in some cases. We're working on a data center in Kenya, and one of the things we're concerned about is the ability to use some of the products of that data center, not just for commercial purposes, but for education, for people in an area where education is not necessarily prized in the same way it is in England or in the US. So we look at it the functional need to make sure that AI, like the electric light, gets distributed to places that don't have it today.
And again, echoing Peng's vision of AI becoming that utility like
Yeah.
electricity and the accessibility. And I think the accessibility point there is really powerful. You say there, so far AI has been an elite tool. So to recognize that, I think, is an important starting point. And then how we can mitigate against that. G42, the LLMs that you've introduced, representing languages from the global south.
Right.
Let's get an insight in terms of
Yeah.
those.
Yeah, I mean, that's an example of it. The other possibilities really are, and that is making sure that AI can be taught to the next generation of children, because otherwise, every year you lose a generation by not teaching them about the world they're going to enter, what kind of jobs they're going to be, what's the social impact of AI. And as the Baroness has really identified so dramatically, the potential to use AI improperly, the potential to abuse people using AI. If you start teaching young people that they have a responsibility to use it properly, you have a better chance to achieve a degree of what we call responsible AI.
And Marty, I really appreciate you putting the spotlight on young people and tapping into the potential, but also giving them the right tools as well. This really brings in your experience, Baroness. I know that you are a passionate advocate of bringing along the next generation. In this context, what would be primary to your focus?
That's interesting you mentioned that, because the global south, of course, from a demographics perspective, is represents many more young people than the Western countries. And so I've been focused quite a lot recently on AI enabled harms. And so I want to flip that around today, though. Let's talk about how do we empower first, and then, how do we stop these harms from happening at the at the outset. So I think one of the great opportunities, having been in both government and technology and kind of gone back and forth, is the potential for AI to empower citizen services and to use the power of AI. Like, we're really great at AI is great at developing code, right? Better than humans. So we hate to admit it because those of us who ever played with coding see now the potential of it, how great it is at developing modules of code. So we can create sort of cognitive stations of code that are transferable or scalable to countries. You could have a full cohort of country services for health, education, social services, agriculture. And that's scalable in the sense that everybody could use the same technology. We could have an AI ready system for a country that enables them to get up to a certain level. And then once you get the country to that level, then the kids are all empowered, the education system is empowered, and then you have an opportunity to really raise the level of opportunity for everyone outside of the United States.
And that addressed what Marty raised earlier, that so far AI has been an elite tool, but that scalability and that accessibility that mitigates against this.
I mean, it's really,
Continuing.
if you think about it, it's really very simple. You are too young to remember this, but when the internet first started, most of us learned about it with a pamphlet, title of which was The Internet for Dummies. And phones, when people started
Yeah.
carrying phones,
Absolutely.
I said, I'm never going to be the guy walking down the street talking on his telephone. And now I never walk down the street when I'm not talking on my telephone. So it's a matter of just the availability of all these modern methods of communication. In a way, artificial intelligence is a form of communication. So how we communicate it has to be done in an effective way. And following what the Baroness said, it has to be done where you emphasize the fact that it's partially a weapon. Words can be weaponized. And AI's ability to do it quickly and pungently and dramatically is the danger. But we can't over dramatize the danger because then people will be frightened of it.
Right.
So many of the programs she's working on attempt to balance that in a way that people can understand it.
I think that's a seamless link to hear more about the projects that you're working on,
Yeah,
Baroness.
I think that leads me to I think people don't realize that the most advanced AI systems in the world are the ad recommendation systems that operate in social media. They're the attention mechanism that keeps us scrolling and coming back and have really had a negative impact in many respects. It's been an enormous financial windfall for companies, but the unintended consequences again have been really challenging to manage. Everyone's becoming aware of the fact that, maybe social media is not great for kids under certain ages, and a lot of jurisdictions are passing legislation for age, in terms of accessibility to social media content and social media platforms and gaming and various other things. But that's almost too late. So I think what's really important at this outset is that we think about these things up front as we roll out these enabling services, that we have these scaled solutions that think about child welfare at the very outset, and that we respect that, because right now we have a reality distortion engine which people see every day, and you think about it in terms of the news they consume and the information they consume. Depending on where you're getting that information, you may have a very different perspective, not at all grounded in reality. So we have to think about ways in which we use this technology to get fact checked, solid journalism out to people, which I'm sure you can appreciate. But I mean, these are all very important questions. And when you think about them in the context of responsible AI and ethical coding and how we build these models, how we train them, the data we use, we make sure that there's representative data from every culture and country to make sure that all points of view are respected and incorporated in the model's thinking, because the model is basically a point of view, and it's the point of view is driven by the data that's trained that model. So we have to think about that, when we're rolling out systems globally. And the great thing we have right now is we have great models from OpenAI and other companies, but we have to think about what is the domain, either domain expertise, around the health areas and various other things that we've talked about earlier. But the other part of it is, how do you integrate the culture and the ethics and the mores of societies outside of, how do you bring that into the equation so that that's represented in the countries that we're talking about?
There's so many interesting points that you've raised there, and I want to pull on all the threads. But the point about culture and ethics and bringing society on board, Martin, your perspective on that.
So the best distribution agent for AI should be TikTok, because some extraordinary number of people under 35 get their, talk about pink, enjoyment, satisfaction, and information from TikTok. So we have to figure out how you actually use it as a teaching tool. Because if we don't use the sort of most acceptable methods of teaching, if we tell young people, we're going to teach you our way, they're going to say, I don't want to learn. I don't want to spend the time. So I think the process by which we achieve some of the things the Baroness is talking about is as important as the goal of doing it. But it's very clear, age 14, age 16, I hate to say it, it's too late.
Yeah,
Age 5, age 4, my grandchildren.
you're right.
So here in Abu Dhabi, we've just instituted courses in AI starting in the primary grades.
And would you say that is the key word there? You said instituted. Does it mean governance, regulation? Your experience in both government and with tech giants,
Right.
is that what we should be advocating?
So I think we have to have an age-appropriate experience for AI. What Marty's describing is, I'm sure it's been a very curated system that's appropriate for young people. And so we have to think that through as we're delivering these systems, that a universal age signal is something I've been advocating that I really believe in. And I think it's an essential component to this next stage. And the reason it's never been adopted in the internet is because of privacy concerns. But now we have new cryptographic and biometric methods that enable you to deliver a privacy-preserving age signal that's verifiable through a parent portal. So when you're delivering that AI, you can have a connection with the parent who says the child is of a certain age. And then everywhere that child goes, every AI-enabled experience they get to will be age appropriate if we get this universal age signal project right, which is what I'm really super passionate about right now. And I think there's an opportunity. We're starting to see the big tech companies say that this is how we solve and get ourselves out of hot water with governments and solve this problem once and for all. And it's the right thing to do. For heaven's sakes, we've been in social media for 15 years. Before that, the internet phase, and we've never gotten this right. And this is our opportunity. And I can't think of a time when it's been more essential to get it right, to solve for age online and in the AI world once and for all.
Well, we certainly pick up on your passion and you're a passionate advocate. You mentioned hot water with government. Give us the context of that.
Oh,
And why someone might look at all of this and say, you both make such a sensible case. Why aren't international governments regulating?
It's a strange moment in the world. I call it a technopolar moment. I think I borrowed that from Ian Bremmer, but it's a very important moment because companies are almost as powerful as governments. I mean, some of the largest companies that dominate this space are really seen as key drivers and decision makers, and it's kind of the tail wagging the dog in the sense like governments are afraid to enforce regulation now so it's time for the companies to take that responsibility and use it wisely. And I think the first and most important thing they can do is adopt these technologies that enable anyone who delivers a service to a child to do it, to know that child's age and deliver an age appropriate experience.
Do we think it will be a reality where companies take this on board, or does there need to be more teeth to this? Do they need to be regulated to
Well,
do so?
our society tends to segment responsibility. So, and we break it up between government, the private sector, and then there's this group of responsible people in between. If we're going to really be successful in achieving responsible AI, we're going to have to look at the entire spectrum, and everybody's going to have to actually cooperate in being responsible. So we've learned when government does everything, it becomes oppressive because in the hands of government, it's in the hands of people, right? People who have power sometimes are excessive. So I think this is really an extraordinary opportunity for the public and private sectors and for people representing children, adults, disabled, minorities to actually get in a room almost and talk about what responsible AI means, because it's really distributing the sense of responsibility in planning how we take AI from where it is today to advanced superintelligence or whatever it's going to be tomorrow.
I really appreciate your comprehensive answer there because you're taking a very holistic approach of actually getting everybody on board and saying it's a collaborative effort. Responsibility should be shared.
Yeah, and
And
we can potentially, this is potentially, you have a greater opportunity to do it in the global south where the habits and the information about AI are still embryonic. And so therefore they don't have institutions that have been built.
that's right.
And so the government of Indonesia could tell Microsoft and Meta, if you're going to come here, here's what you have to do. You have to be part of a consortium that decides what kind of education we're going to have in our school system. I mean, the opportunity for real leadership, which you see in the leadership in the UAE, can be replicated. It's going to be easier for us to convince, let's say, a country in Africa or in Southeast Asia to try something like this than it's going to be to go back to England or France or tell Macron, this is the way you should do something.
I think that's a really fascinating insight that you shared there with us, Marty, about the global south. And you're right to say it links back into what Baroness was saying. A younger population in general, embryonic perhaps, the AI systems there. So there's a chance to actually shape more so and a lot more opportunity. Um, Tell us about, you mentioned there the UAE and what's happening here, often spoken about as a blueprint in many different sectors. Healthcare might be one of them, but when it comes to AI and responsible intelligence, responsible AI, what can be taken here from this incubation and scaled up?
People. So the leadership in the UAE is extraordinary. I came here 25 years ago. And if you look at what the leadership has done in a country that's not a democracy, it's extraordinary because the sense of responsibility and the sense of commitment to turn modernity into almost a software application for its residents while preserving some of the traditions of the prior generations is really extraordinary. Now it's easier to do in a small country, but the model is replicable if people really want to do it. So here, they're incredibly open-minded. Uh, 12 years ago, I spoke to Sheikh Mohammed about the need for having an American-style university here. And 10 minutes later, he said, get it for me. And so we now have NYU here. And so if you look at the Abrahamic Accords, first country to sign them was the UAE. And so I think we're lucky here. And not every country is lucky. But I think AI is such a dramatic departure from anything anybody's experienced that leadership, and even in countries in other places like the global south, you may be able to convince them that this is the time to change.
And we really appreciate you sharing that historic perspective and your great insight in terms of how this country has evolved, but also how it actually is led from the leadership to bring about that change and foresight. Baroness, you have a deep relationship with the UAE as well. Let's draw on that kind of international perspective that you can bring here, but also what you are learning from your experience of being here.
I've had a very deep relationship with the Ministry of the Interior here through His Highness Sheikh Saif for I think 12 years since we've been working together on child protection online issues. And what I've found is the vision of the country and the leader has been it 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 infiltrates everything that they do in a can-do way, an attitude where His Highness developed a AI for Safer Communities initiative, which led to us involving an interfaith element and bringing all the world's religious leaders here to talk about issues that were people didn't even want to talk about. They didn't feel they even had these issues in their societies, and we had to bring them all together. And even we brought in the Vatican and all the various religious leaders from all around the world came. And it was that insight to say that this technology is going to impact our lives in substantial ways, and an interface element was a key part of that. So I thought that was really an interesting insight. The other thing most recently was His Highness funded it's called Unicre. It's the UN AI and Robotics Institute in The Hague. And that institute has reviewed and certified over 100 products that enable countries to manage AI applications in their territories, to manage investigations, and to bring that sort of element in so that we can scale best practices around the world. So I've found working with the UAE just the most refreshing. It's always a new canvas. Like if you bring an idea and it's a good idea, they get behind you and they support you and they put their, funds and support behind these really powerful initiatives and they see them first.
And I
Which I
think
think is really important.
and we've used that word, haven't we? Foresight. The foresight is here, but it's also then following up with real action, and drawing on the international expertise, working with the homegrown talent here in this country, and having that kind of culturally sensitive and appropriate application here in the UAE. It's such a nuanced picture, but they benefit from yourself, Baroness, for coming and sharing your international experience.
I should say that they've been the 10 years benefactor of We Protect Global Alliance, the organization that I founded that is aimed at protecting kids from online abuse and exploitation. And they've just been this, strong force and foundation behind everything that we do.
And Marty, when we speak about AI for good, how can we ensure it doesn't simply become a bit of a catch-all, a bit of a buzzword? How can we put teeth behind that as well?
Well, that's the challenge for each individual, really. Obviously, you need to infuse the concept into institutions, whether they be government or large companies, because AI generally has been either a startup company or a giant company like a Microsoft or Meta. Um, but it's really up to the people to actually develop the habit. And that's where the opportunity is. AI is still new. And so the habits around its use, um, the potential to change them as the Baroness is doing in protecting young children and in making people understand how to use it properly and making people understand how to use it at all. I mean, if you accept the predictions, 40-some% of the jobs as we know them today are going to be gone and different ones will take their place. So we have to start training people again, and we have to start retraining people again. And so it requires this enormous collaborative effort, or the next podcast you're going to be doing in a year from now is going to be a depressing one as opposed to an optimistic one that talks about opportunity. It's going to talk about remediation. And none of us want to be there.
No.
So for the people who are really the people like the Baroness and others who are actually the leaders in making AI part of every culture, they're the ones that have to be convincing and bring that passion for responsible conduct and for ethical conduct and make it part. I mean, one of the questions I was going to talk to her about is, at what point do you have to start making AI have responsible AI so it's one word? At what point does everybody who's doing something and need to adopt responsible AI? And when you think about what Peng said in his remarks, we are all creating the content for AI because everything we write and publish becomes the data that AI uses. So we have the opportunity to actually manage what we say a bit to make sure this concept of responsible AI becomes part of the language of AI.
And I think the point you make there about shared responsibility, it really resonates with the conversation we're having here, but also the goal for AI as well. And that idea of strategic collaboration, but also that everyday experience that people have their touch points with AI. You mentioned AI is still new and there's a lot of potential. It's still up for grabs in terms of how we shape it before it kind of runs off on its own course. Some people might say it already has. So, on that note, I really appreciate both of you giving us your international expertise and your expertise from your various sectors as well. May I offer you the last question here as a kind of call to action? What might be the next critical step that you would encourage in order to speed up responsible AI and responsible intelligence, becoming, as you say, an everyday phenomena, not something that we simply are just reaching for? Baroness, if I can begin with you, if everything was at your disposal, all the resources and all the policy change.
I think we've entered, and some people have said this, a cognitive industrial revolution, but we can't afford to have it be, decades or
Right.
centuries to get this to, distribute this potential and intelligence everywhere. So it's incumbent upon us, as Marty said, there's right now there's a bit of elitism. There's a certain amount of small number of people involved, and because of the cost of developing a foundational model and deploying and delivering there's so many restrictions on companies entering that. But now we have these great foundational models. How do we make sure that we take that, scale that, and deliver that through Stargate and other mechanisms so that we can empower the entire world and elevate society? And I did my first digital startup in 1985. So this is a long road for me. This is the first time I actually feel like the stars are aligning and that we have an opportunity to really help society meet technology and raise the value of life and quality of life for everyone. And I actually feel more optimistic than ever. I mean, people worry about the safety, and I know we've got great safety institutes looking at things like potential for things to go wrong, but we need to look at the human opportunity and how do we increase human agency, empower people to do things that are much more interesting and cognitively rewarding, and let the things that the AI can do better than us go. And let's let AI serve us, and let's go to that next level. And I think we're here to talk about those issues today, and we're here to take that forward, and we have that responsibility. And I think things are coming together and people are becoming aware of that, and I feel really optimistic.
And I love your sense of optimism. You certainly pick up on some really optimistic concepts and deliverables there, which echo back to your first answer about human dignity. You mentioned there about human agency, scaling, empowering, elevating society. So, Marty, you gave us some homework, didn't you? You said in a year's time we could be doing a podcast which is depressing or optimistic. But if we follow what Baroness is advocating, then we're on the right path. Marty, yourself, a call to action. What's the next kind of big critical step that you would like to see taken?
So I can't really improve on what the Baroness said, but I think we have to think about how our society learns. And if you think about it, you are one of the ones responsible for that. Celebrities in general are the way people learn, whether they're celebrities on Instagram, TikTok,
That's a good point.
or the one or two who still can write and are in the New York Times. So we need to have our teachers who are not the ones who are in the schools. We need to have the celebrities of our society understand that this is both a responsibility and an opportunity, and they should start to talk about it. I mean, who better than Tom Cruise?
That's right. I'm with you,
And,
Marty.
and I know it sounds naive. Why would Tom Cruise do this? I actually think he would. So we need to figure out how to harness the engine of education, which in our society, fortunately or unfortunately, are celebrities.
I thought that was a very generous point when you mentioned celebrities and looked at me and mentioned me explicitly. And I was thinking over my shoulder, who's entered the room? That's very generous of you. And then you mentioned Tom Cruise, of course. And it just leaves me to say, next time we have the podcast conversation with you both, I think Tom should also have a seat at the table. I might not give him as many questions as you both, because actually I think you both are such passionate advocates, and drawing on your expertise and your experience today, I know there's a note that there's urgency here, and there's some real world issues that we need to address. But the spirit of optimism in addressing them, the collaboration with G42, the international collaboration that we bring in here on this table, it's profound. And I will just say, please do return to the podcast for the G42 on-air podcast series to bring us up to speed with what's being delivered. There's a lot of promise that was given today. Let's ensure that people do deliver it. Thank you so much, Marty and Baroness, for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. Please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And see you for the next episode of G42 on Air.